Hey everybody, welcome to Pianist Academy. And I'm Charles Szczepanek. Welcome to another live stream Q&A and Masterclass session today. Let me know if the video is coming through okay and the sound is okay. I think the internet got a little shaky there right at the end of the introduction. Today is a really, really cool day. So I see Ahmed is here in the chat. Welcome, Ahmed. Haydar is here. Thanks for saying hi, Haydar. If you haven't, we have a handful of people here. So Rodrigo, awesome, Rodrigo. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Hello. And yeah, so if you haven't dropped your name in the chat, let me know where you're tuning in from, what time it is. I see Jess P is here. Awesome. Antonio is here. Welcome, everybody. Some new viewers and some old friends. Beautiful. We're starting today off. Hey, Sir Wolseley is back. Great. Awesome. Good to see you again, Sir Wolseley. We are kicking off today with a viewer submission, another masterclass submission. This is super cool, of Rajat playing. Is Raj, can I call you Raj if you're here? Is Raj here? I hope he is. Juan, thank you for being here, Juan. Hello. Jose is here. Awesome. Welcome. Great. We have a wonderful crowd. Hopefully, fingers crossed that that Raj can make it today. But we're going to kick off with him playing the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Sonata. He's playing. He's let me over the first movement, and I feel like it is such an achievement. We're not going to have time to work through the whole movement, but I feel like it's such an achievement that we're going to listen to his performance of the entire movement. So. It's a little under 8 minutes. So hopefully Raj tunes in very soon if he isn't here already. Oh, and we have OCD King. Awesome. Welcome back. So yeah, hopefully he tunes in very quickly, and we're going to get started with that. This will be a fun one. So here we go. Let me cue it up. Beautifully done, Raj, if I can call you Raj. Welcome here. Welcome to the stream. Let's go. Let's all drop some applause in the chat for Raj. Yes. Yes. So thanks for sending this in. Let's have a quick talk, all of us that are here. I think, yeah, we have a variety of levels of student here today, but even for those that are maybe early in their piano journey, you may have heard of this piece before. Massive, massive staple of the piano repertoire that is only about 100 years old. It's amazing. Let's open it up to everybody in the chat. What do you think what scene is this, at least this movement, what scene is the movement painting? And if you could give maybe just one emotion, an adjective, a short phrase, something like that. And Raj, I'd especially love to hear from you. What is this movement doing for you emotionally? Where is it taking you? I'll give everybody a second to drop their thoughts in the chat about that. Hadar says, struggle to emerge. I like that. Hadar, you're a big fan of Rachmaninoff. Have you heard this piece before? Raj says, feels like a fight against depression. Dith says, angst. Sir Worsley, agitated but resolved maybe in some way. Jess said, a storm. These are all great. Great. Raj said, moments of respite that feel like gasping for breath. Good. I'm very happy. Part of the reason I wanted to open this up to everybody was to hear exactly if Raj's playing was taking you in the direction of where this piece needs to go. And I feel like that definitely has happened. So that's great. I think we can characterize the entire piece, but especially this movement, as kind of a juxtaposition of two ideas. I feel it that way. It's very intense and it's very almost kind of violent in a way. So I tend to think of a couple different images. An erupting volcano is one of them. And the big explosions of music that we have are actually the volcano erupting. And then other moments we have just this like molten lava all around us, steaming and slowly moving by. Another thing that you could think about, this piece could be like, we like an earthquake. We never physically see an earthquake happen where, the ground splits. That's very rare. I guess it does happen, but it's more often depicted in movies that way. If we think about like a cinematic depiction of an earthquake and this fissure opening up in the ground, and we're standing on both sides of it, and one side is shaking like mad, and the other side is perfectly calm, like the earthquake isn't affecting the other side of the land at all. And we have 1 foot in each. So summing those up, it's like a balance of chaos and, balance, peacefulness. Very much leaning into the chaos, but most importantly, the piece isn't simply chaotic. It's not simply just an explosion of notes. And that's usually one of the things that makes this piece the most difficult to pull off in a performance, is that it can easily turn into just a fury of notes without as much pulling of the listener around to different places, into different emotions. And some of them we get musically, and some of them we really don't. We really have to work to manufacture some of that, and that's going to be a little bit of what we talk about today. So first of all, Raj, congratulations. I'm guessing you know the whole piece, all 3 movements. Congratulations on that. It's and as I was reading through the comments as we were listening to the end of this, that you were self-trained for a while and then have taken lessons with organists. Who is your current teacher, I'm assuming that they are a pianist. Let us know. Okay, the first thing I would like to talk about is actually what happened in a piece like this. This can be a huge part of the second half of a recital program. So there might be a few other things, but very small things. If we're going to play this publicly, okay, he's a pianist. Great, thanks for sharing that, Raj. So if we're going to play this publicly, there is something that I really want to share with you that I learned from actually on two separate occasions from two different mentors of mine. And it's about what happens before we even start playing the first note, because how we sit at the piano and how we prepare to play a piece of music puts the audience in the frame of mind that, it starts to put them in the frame of mind. And one thing that is very typical in every classical performance you see is that a pianist comes out and they adjust the bench and they get things ready and they compose themselves and then they play, right? And there's usually a very long pause, a very long moment of silence, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. We have an opportunity, because that is so common, and this piece starts with such an explosion. We have a great opportunity to really just blow people away without them expecting it. So, if you can think about, before you walk out on stage to play this piece, before the audience sees you, before you walk out, while you're backstage getting ready, that's when we start to compose ourselves. That's when we think about exactly what's the tempo we're going to take. How are we attacking the first pitch? How is this first page going to go? What's the mood we want to put people in? We calm all breathing, right? So all that happens before we walk out. And then we walk out on stage and we're already in this place. And if we really feel that, the audience is going to feel it too. They're going to sense it just in our demeanor, especially in a piece like this that starts with this explosion. If you feel that before you walk out, your walk is going to be different. Your posture is going to be different. The way you bow is going to be different. That's part of it. Second part, instead of sitting down on the bench, hopefully you don't have to play this with anybody else. So this is assuming that you've played the previous piece, or assuming that it's your solo recital program. You don't have to adjust the bench at all. It's already positioned and you know it is. So if that's all good to go, we come out, we put our butt down, and we launch into the opening bar because we're already composed. And the audience, what it's going to do to them is, if they were fumbling or adjusting themselves in their seat, they're immediately going to go, and they're going to sit up and sit back a little bit, and you instantly have their attention. And that is exactly what we want in a piece like this. We don't want to give them a chance to breathe, really. We want them almost feeling like they're holding their breath until the meno mosso, and then they get a chance to breathe with us. Okay? Now, I wouldn't do this without, Raj, you said like a gut punch. Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, Rodrigo, if the live is not coming through great for you. We get like a gut punch, like you are grabbing the audience and saying, you're coming with me. This is not an invitation. It's a demand. You're coming with me on this journey through fire and smoke and breathlessness, right? And that starts before we play the first note. So, one other word to think about. So all of that was taught to me by Paul Arant, who was the composer of the piece that was playing on the stream before we started today. Great, fantastic pianist, really cool composer. On the flip side of this, pianist Alexandra Corsantia used to tell me that when we have a piece like this to play, whether there's a couple in the repertoire, we want to feel like we are a whirlwind of energy. Again, before we walk out on stage, we have all of this pent-up energy. We feel it, and we're in control of it. We can breathe through it, and we walk out, and it's a very similar idea, but we walk out, and we do not give the audience time to remove themselves from the whirlwind that is us. They don't get a chance to compose themselves with us. They just come right along. Now, I wouldn't attempt this in public for the first time before you practice it somewhere else, because if you're used to having time to adjust and get settled, we don't want to launch into 20 minutes, 22 minutes. We don't want to launch into that unless we're really ready, because we could go down some not great roads for us. So if you can practice performing this at home, performing it for a few friends, performing it for your teacher that way, where you don't get that time to adjust and prep yourself, but you walk up, you sit down, and we go. That can set up the entire exposition of the first movement to be so much different and so much more successful emotionally for us and for the audience as well. So that's the first thing. Rodrigo asks, would you recommend this for competitions? I think it could have a good effect. So a lot of piano competitions are open to the public, and you can definitely capture the public, opinion. There's always like an audience, audience award, or there's an audience component to a lot of the big piano competitions where the audience gets a vote. And I don't know exactly how they're weighted against the jury, but yeah, there could be something we do at a competition if this is a piece that you can walk out and play like that. Sometimes in competition rounds, if we're presenting this with other repertoire, the competitor doesn't have a chance to get up and walk off stage. When you're out there for your 45-minute round, usually that's like the semifinal round or something. In some competitions, it's the final. So Raj says that's what Yun-chan does before, and that's what he did at the Clyburn. Beautiful. So that's a great example. It works because he won. So, and it shows that if we can do this successfully, it shows you're in complete control. But we can't do that and I wouldn't do it if we have to play other rep in the competition round before we launch into this and before we start. So, if you're going to play a 45-minute round and it's all going to be Rachmaninoff, and maybe there's, an etude in there, an etude tableau, and maybe there's a few preludes, and then we play the sonata to close the round, we're not going to do that, because usually even there isn't any applause between pieces in a competition, in many of them. So there isn't even a chance to get up and take a bow between repertoire. So this is really only if it's the first thing that you walk out and sit down and play. And in a solo recital setting, every piece we get up, we leave stage, we come back, and we sit down and do this. And even if you choose not to do that, if you choose to stay out at the piano and play, you can still kind of cut off the audience applause from the last piece, and it works okay in a recital setting. Okay, that ties into the very first thing, technical thing that I want to talk about with this piece. I'm going to put, Raj, I'm going to put your playing back on the screen for a sec. Okay, that very, very first attack, you're starting with hands on the keyboard already. And you do a couple little lifts, and it looks like you're a little nervous. Maybe you were a little bit because you're taking a video. That's totally fine. We can get rid of some of that nervous energy and really solidify this first note if we do one preparatory motion, even if we place our hands on the keys, one preparatory motion, and then in. Right? So I would even choose to not start with hands on the keys. I would have left hand probably down, right hand would come up, And then I'd go from there. I mean, it's a little bit about presentation here, but it's also about exactly how that first note sounds. Now, whether you choose to play this first note out as an accent or not, that's an interpretive choice. I like putting an accent on the first one. I say this like I've played the piece before. I have not played this piece. I've heard it a million times performed, and I spent a short little bit of time prepping some notes. If I were to perform the piece, I would put an accent on the first note of this downward run. That's one choice. The other choice is, I think, a really dramatic explosion, a really dramatic crescendo. But to me, I don't want to wait until the downbeat of the first full bar to have people feel that. And it's not going to really work as well with this whole thing that we just talked about getting the audience engaged from your first note. Awesome. Raj, you got a subscriber. Beautiful. Okay, so Raj, you said I do crescendo right now and then play the run faster. Think about, see if you like incorporating a bit of an accent on the first F. And especially because that'll let you really sink into the first note. And we don't want to feel tentative on this first page at all, right? Okay, second question for you, Raj. Why have you chosen to play the revised version? So for those that don't know, and Raj, go ahead and answer that. For those that don't know, there are two versions of this sonata. There's the original version, which was written in 1913, which is a bit longer. And, well, I'll give you the positive and negatives as people feel about it. It has a lot more virtuosic passages, but people also feel like it can be a little too drawn out. Like we don't get the themes fast enough, and it's just showy without purpose. And then there is the revised version, revised in 1931. There are some pretty significant changes. So as Raj answers why he chose to play the revised version, I'll find that really interesting. It's becoming more and more popular to do that with this piece instead of playing the original. If you didn't have a chance, Raj, and for everybody else here, Valentino Sitsa 3 months ago put out a video recording here on YouTube of the 1913, the original edition. And I love it. It's such a great performance. I don't quite know if I love it. My absolute favorite performance of this sonata ever was Van Cliburn's. And he was also playing the original, the 1913. I may like her performance more than his. Okay, so Raj says, you chose the revised because it's more compositionally sound and compact. The point of the sonata is that it drives everything from the first few bars, yes. Okay, so structure. Great. Good reason. Raj, you might think about doing something that's like Horowitz did, where you can take little bits of both versions and combine them yourself. You don't have to simply stick to one and play it. So, for example, the second bar of the sonata after our downward run, that's all the same. In the revised version, we get this... it's just some broken octaves. And then the original, they're repeated chords. That would be a spot, for example, that I would choose to play the 1913 instead of the revised. Just for like the first page. Maybe some of the second page too. And then switch back and forth. Cliburn eventually did. I think his recordings that I really, really love are just him playing the original 1913, especially the recording of him playing live in Moscow. I think it's 1960. Okay, so Raj, there are a few places that you might consider, and I'm not talking about the big passages, so we're not going to take the structure apart, but something like that second bar, that is, oh gosh, the sound is so different then. No matter how well we articulate and accent, it doesn't sound the same. The original's a smidge harder, but it's not dramatically harder. So that's one spot, Raj. The second spot, let's see, I'm looking at both as I talk to you about this. Oh, after we have this first theme that's established. Beautiful chord there. The revised edition goes straight to a single F sharp in the bass. The original edition goes to an octave and a fifth. That would also be something that I'd consider putting in, because the octave and a fifth comes back a few pages later in the revised. As soon as, let's see, we're in the middle of... second time around, here. There it is. Getting into that, we have an octave plus a fifth. So there is a compositional reason to perhaps include it the very first time that voicing happens. Oh, it's even the same notes, just enharmonically spelled differently. First time is F sharp minor, second time is G flat major, right? Okay, you can continue to look for little things like that. They're not going to, I think, dramatically affect or change your memory or anything like that. We don't want to do something like that. But they could be nice little tidbits to tie in that, especially for people that know the sonata, they're going to say, oh, that's cool. I like that. I like that we've combined interesting ideas from both. And then you'll really dive in and have good reasons for that. Okay. Next little tidbit. So, Raj, we're only going to have time to probably talk about the first few pages of this, but I think everything that we're about to talk about you can apply really to the whole piece. The rest of our conversation today is going to be about texture and intention of line. So let's put up, I'll put up the music so people can follow along and so you can too. Give me just a second. Of course, right when I want to do that, my iPad timed out. Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm looking at, just right in the beginning here, this very first line. Let's add a new layer. Okay. This very first line that we have in the left hand. The beginning of this piece isn't at all sentimental, or I would even dare to say emotional at all. This isn't a line that goes... It's not a line that's sighing, and it's not a line that's leading us away. It's more like, it is decrescendoing, but it's more like a fire that's sizzling out. Not like not a relaxing moment. So if we play just the beginning of this, so there's intention. And even though there's a decrescendo here, and a diminuendo, we don't want to take it too far, and we don't really want it to relax all that much. If we do let it relax, that kind of takes us out of the mood of this whole opening, right? So every time this happens, and I noticed even a little bit in your video, sometimes when you'd have this descending line, whether it was in this first passage or that you kind of looked up and you got a little smoke in your eyes, if you will. It got a little tender. I would avoid that because we don't want to give tenderness, not on the first page. So these lines all have intention. They're all doing something. If this is our primary explosion, the volcano exploding, yeah? Okay, so that makes a big, big change, and also how we lead into the next phrase. So don't let these little tidbits get too emotional throughout this whole exposition. Okay, second thing. All right, going back. Sometimes we get these, Rajat, you say, I ended up trying to follow the line down, but you lost the momentum. Yeah, we've got to follow the line. We want a different emotional attachment to it. We want less of a sentimental, sensitive attachment to it and more of this is still a driving force that it's just fizzling a little bit. It's not going away and we're not getting teary or, this isn't actually a chance to breathe. This isn't part of getting a breath in. This is holding our breath. The explosions happened. There's smoke filling the air. There's fire everywhere. Right? So we don't want to drop that. We don't want to let that decrease, that intention. Okay. Next little bit. Oh, just a tiny, tiny little thing. Here we go. This note and these, just be really careful that we don't accidentally bring out this right-hand guy and make it sound like it's part of the melody. Yeah? Sometimes if the thumb attacks a little bit too much, that pulls us away, and I heard that a little bit in your recording. And the melody turns into ba-dum. We don't want to obscure that. That's just a really, really small tidbit. Okay, next bit. So we're coming down to here in the third system of my page. Oh, good, I'm glad. I'm glad that I'm in agreement with your professor. That's good. Okay, anytime we're on this first page and we get this, let's go back to red. Okay, this restatement of, we want to be sure that all of these musical ideas are in different layers. So let's go back to the beginning. If I start at the very top, this is all kind of one idea, right? This is a layer. Now the repeated notes are a separate thing. And then our melody is also a separate thing, right? So now if we jump down to where we were and we attack this, these left-hand sixteenths, we don't want to be bringing those out so much that we don't hear a very strong statement of that in the right hand. Yeah? So these all aren't even. Even though this whole page the big moments are fortissimo, they're not all equal. Everything that's happening in the hand isn't equal. This bass note is massive. The most important thing here is the pulse, right? And the sense of drive it's giving us. But if we pound it out, that detracts from what the bell-like figure that's in the right hand. This, which is exactly the same notes, just reharmonized, right? First bar, second bar. All we want to do is highlight that we're in a new harmony here with the pedal tone. So I would be careful that when we land in this restatement that we don't have ba-bum, ba-bum. We want to hear boom, ba-dum. And not too many da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Right? Is that making sense? Let me jump over to Dith's question real quick. And what Rodrigo. How do composers decide which direction the stems of the notes will go? Rodrigo said, read behind bars. Rodrigo, that's a great book. I've got it on my bookshelf. It's like the textbook for notation. So composers, I'll just talk to you from my point of view because I'm a composer also. There are a couple reasons. It can show a little bit of how we pedal because most of the composers don't write pedal markings in. And if they, that's not all that common. And if they're older composers, not Rachmaninoff, let's say, Beethoven, Chopin, we need to be really careful about how we obey them because their instruments were different than ours today. So in this case, I read this as a little bit of pedal marking, a little bit of, they're technically different voices. Bach was the pro at writing things in different voices. But if we think about Rachmaninoff, and this ties right into what we're talking about with Raj, which is great, different stem directions can help us determine different layers, different textures, different orchestration. So if we have a big stem down in the bass, that could be a big bass drum, probably not even timpani, but a huge bass drum. And the rest of this, those are different things. So every time, and it gets really confusing. It can get very, very confusing. But it's a great hint into what was in the composer's mind when we have that stuff. Let me give you a couple more examples because there's one other thing that's really important to mention about that. So as we're looking at, let me just turn this, we'll actually be able to see more. Okay. So let's look at this first descending line that we just talked about before, right? Most of these are stem down, and then we have one stem up pitch. In this case, that is a pitch that we need to hold with the hand while we do some other pedal work. So Rachmaninoff has told us, I want this to sustain. You're probably going to be flutter pedaling or doing something else, so use a finger and make sure it sustains. What usually confuses people is the more experience you have, the more you realize when things mean certain things. So we've got that example I just pointed out, and then we have this one on the very first line that's very similar. We've got a half note and then these other pitches. And there's no way for the hand to hold that and do this. That's not going to happen. So in this case, this is just showing the duration of, or how I sometimes like to read it, how long the pedal is down. Not to say that we can't continue to pedal the whole phrase, but that we really want to focus on hearing these half notes at least until the rest that's present. That's a lot of this stuff, the change in voices, that's all the same between the original and the revised. There's nothing that's different. Nothing that I'm seeing offhand. So Dith, I hope that answers your question. All right. Let's jump back over to what we were talking about here. So, okay, so we talked about making sure we have these different layers so that this isn't detracting from the bells ringing on the top. Whoops. Okay, last little bit about this opening. We have this a couple times. Right? You seem to be playing it, Raj, with very light pedal, very dry pedal. Something that's closer to that. I would encourage you to use more, but be really careful about the notes that you bring out in this texture. Here's a case where we don't have different voices given to us. We just have all of these 16th notes. For those of you, I'm looking right here, starting here, just that bar. So what's really difficult is that all of these Fs in the right hand get repeated by the right hand, sometimes by left hand. We have a bunch of notes that get struck and struck and struck and struck again, right? So if we voice up the melody here, of course with a good crescendo too. Yeah? So yes, you said pedaling the melody notes. Yes, I'm pedaling for the top notes, not worrying about the rests that are in the bottom. Those rests are just giving my hand. I'm not sustaining those, right? But the other really important thing is that the lower notes throughout here in the right hand, I'm really being sure that on the re-strikes of them, that they're not coming out of the texture too much. So I want to maintain the focus on the upper. That was okay. That was not great. So here's a good example. At the end of the bar, we've been crescendoing. We're going to bring out this one. But then we do not want to bring out those so much, and we really want to bring out the top so that we're not hearing, right? But we're hearing a change. Dum, bum, bum. The other notes are still going to be present, and they're still going to drive us forward. So we should be focusing on calming them a little bit so that they're not detracting us, or not distracting us, not detracting from the top. Yeah. Okay. Let's see, I have some more notes here. This is a similar concept. Okay, so this is, Raj, you know where this is, a couple lines later. I'd really be sure that we're hearing, most importantly, the top, and only a little bit of the movement that's underneath. And that will continue into the next line. Let's see, I've got my fingering written in my book. Nah. So that we're still hearing ba-dum, ba-dum. That's the focus. And everything else is just simply aiding in this smoldering fire, or this burning fire. Right? So same idea, but different line there. Leading out of this, man, it is, there's an accelerando from the first time we get this statement, because we got a little poco rit. You can take more time in that poco rit, by the way, I feel. We can approach it. Right? So that was just taking more time. Make it less of a poco, more of just a rit. When we get into this accel, back to tempo primo, man, there are people play this so many different ways. It's really dangerous and really difficult to let this 16th notes, if they start to run too quickly early in this phrase, we don't actually achieve tempo primo until we land here. That's many bars later. I'd be really careful. This is one instance I would not follow what Horowitz does. Horowitz, well, he takes the pedal off, and the right hand is just, it's really messy, if I'm totally honest. I would not do that. It's an interesting interpretation to listen to, but I'd be really careful. Still bringing out the top. Oh, and I was listening to someone else play this, someone from the previous Clyburn. I can't remember their name. I think they were the gold medalist. They took a lot of time that's one approach. I feel like I wouldn't want to push and pull like that through each of these phrases. It's one way to really successfully make sure that we bring out the top line. That's great. And it really helps execute that, especially in a stressful situation. Yes, Yikwun Sunwoo. I have no idea if I said his name right. If he's listening, I apologize. But yes, that's exactly the recording I'm talking about. So you can do a little bit of push and pull, but once again, it sentimentalizes this movement, or the beginning of this movement, and I don't really think that that's what this piece is about. So if we can keep things straighter but still bring out the top, that would be fantastic. And now, Raj, you said you feel breathless when you get to the octaves. We don't want us to feel breathless yet. If the audience does, great. So, about the octaves that are coming up here. We land. Sorry, I'm almost sight reading it. So, I'm playing a lot of wrong notes. So, if we can hear some inner phrases in here, let me show you what I mean. Here we go. So here's top of the page here is the beginning of the octaves. Each of these guys in the right hand, we can feel a little bit of a slur on. And so we're not just going splashing through this and going crazy, but there's a sink in and then a release. So you hear that happening, even though I'm playing it very slowly, right? And then we can still ping all of these bell-like figures that are on the top, which is great. Something else that I might encourage you to do that a number of performers do, and I'll come back to your question in a second, Raj. When we land on the big octaves here, you could take a tiny bit of time to emphasize those. So if these, especially if you find in performance that these are starting to run away, you can pull back a little bit right on those really, really big ones. It's a great opportunity to do that. Also think about in your end here, have that writ just a little bit. It needs to be one of two things. It either needs to be perfectly accelerandoing all the way to the end with extremely crisp attacks, especially these last two. They have to be huge and punchy if we don't pull back at all, or you have another option. If we do take like just a polka retard, we can bring those out, highlight the rest that's after them, and then really make a big impact. Yeah? So that would be my preference, would be to pull back a little bit there. It just feels a lot safer and it's still really impactful. So let me answer your questions here. Phrasing toward the low D flat, you asked. I'm not exactly oh, B flat, you corrected. I would actually make smaller phrases than that. So what I drew on here, these little phrases that let me highlight again, that are between these notes and would continue and continue here and here and here. I'm only highlighting one note. I don't mean the inner note. I mean the whole chord. But that we hear ba-da, 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 ba. Just that little bit of release and lift, one, makes it so much easier to play technically, and two, it's differentiating all of the layers that we have here. So this isn't just it needs to be more orchestrated than that. Because if we look at the rhythm, it is just all 16th notes. Yeah. Every time I go for it, I mess up. So sorry about the wrong notes there. Does that make more sense? These little inner phrases, purely to take us away from feeling like it's it's not. This isn't like machine gun fire. It's not Prokofiev. So we can add in these little different articulations there. Gosh, I can't believe it's already been just about an hour on this. There was one more, let's say 2 more things that I want to highlight for you on this. And then I'd love to answer, if people that are here answer any of the questions that they might have. And Raj, yeah, you said helps ground the passage. So even if you want to just accelerondo straight through this and have no pause on the big chord that happens halfway through this statement, that's fine. And this would even probably make it even a little bit more musical and more successful. And I'm not talking about a big phrase. You might have to practice in a bit of an exaggeration. But then when it comes time to play it, just the tiniest difference in articulation from the first to the second is going to make a big difference in how we feel the ebb and flow of this. So that it's not just, and this is one of the, I think, kind of summarizes everything to continue thinking about in this piece. This piece is full of fast notes. But if we think about them as being in different layers or in different textures, not every texture, if we think about it as orchestrated, right? Not every member of the orchestra is playing in this blisteringly fast speed. The combined effect is that, but different voices, different textures are doing different things. They're not always given to us with stem direction. So I'd encourage you to look for more of those opportunities because the piece is full of them. We're only 3 pages in, 2 on my printed score, 3 on my iPad score. And we've already uncovered, I don't know, a half a dozen or more. And so just imagine how many more there are as you continue to go through your score for the next 15 pages or so. Okay, the last couple things. All right, so before we get into the development, we've got this. These little semi-grace note figures, running passage, right? There are plenty of people that take this with a single hand, and it's fine and it's lovely. This is not an etude, so I would give a shot to, you have to play the first notes of this bar with this third gets played with left hand anyway, and then the right hand comes up. I would not be the only pianist to tell you, play the first 2 notes of the rest of this bar, the same 2 notes that match the third that begins the bar, with the left hand. it makes it a lot easier to just whip that off. And we can get a super great attack because we're using a separate hand on the accented pitch. If you want to throw that in, I know that would be a bit of a significant change in how you've practiced it. It's something to consider if you don't have a performance coming up super soon. And then also, when your right hand takes over in the next bar, just these 6 notes, you're actually going to end up playing exactly the same pattern that the right hand played in the previous bar. So if I show you that, now you can see all the notes I took. If I show you this, let's see. Okay. Here we go. You say, I think that would help get the line. Yeah. So left hand is already playing. Here we go. Left hand's already playing this. So left hand would continue to play those and those and those. Probably with 4 and 2 each time. Yeah. And then the right hand, that opens up the right hand to play, let's see, 5, I'll put it in blue, as black maybe. 5, 2, 5, 2, 4, 1, 3, 1. There we go. So 5, 2, 4, 1, 3, 1, which makes this a really great passage to just rotate through. Now, when we go to the next bar, the right hand has exactly the same pitches, which we can continue to play with the same fingering we established. 5, 2, 4, 1, 3, 1. Yeah, so that could be helpful in really getting that passage to just speak like crazy without a whole lot of practice. Okay, last just 2 notes, really quick about the beginning of the development section. Really try to put an image to this phrase. Are these all bells ringing? Is this regaining some breath all the breath that we lost in the first handful of pages of the movement? Is it a little bit of both? These notes all have tenuto marked on them, the beginning of each phrase. Maybe the tenuto is, I'm just going to throw out a bunch of ideas. Maybe the tenuto is a bell striking, but the rest of the passage is not. And then we have another bell. And a bell. But they need to be somewhat soft strikes because this is all mezzo forte and decrescendoing. That's one way to think about this. If this is regaining some breath, we can be a bit less literal about playing this exactly in rhythm. That's exactly in rhythm. But if we just breathe through and let our breath as it comes back to us influence the rhythm in the passage. Of course, I'm still playing the rhythm. I'm still playing 16ths and 8ths. But it's been influenced by a different emotion, right? Same thing with this next bar. The left hand has straight 16ths with just a few ties. Right? Tie? Tie. Those ties can influence how we interpret how the passage moves. So we don't want this to be simply da 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 da. You didn't play the end of the bar that quickly out, but we have a tendency to play all the rest of those sixteenths very strictly. And here is our perfect opportunity, right? I kind of took away our expressiveness at the beginning of the piece. Here's a great opportunity to really add some back in. Because despite what it looks like on the page, despite what it looks like here, with these hairpins in the middle of the bar, the hairpins only actually apply to the upper notes. Yeah. In the original edition, the hairpin is only from this A flat to the B flat, back to the A flat. It's not everything else in the bar. So the rest of what the hands are doing is all in service of faking that kind of crescendo. And so if we think about that, we can definitely be much more creative in our approach to exactly how much time do we take. And that can really just be a nice flowing. And then anybody that has questions, Rodrigo had one a while ago. I'll come back to that. Hopefully Rodrigo's still here. So, oh no. Oh no. Are we back? I think my internet dropped. Sorry about that. Oh, okay. I think we're back. Sorry about that. That gave me a breathless moment. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to mention here. Great, thanks, Jane. Okay. The last thing, Raj, was that when we have these grace notes that are throughout the development, let's just make sure that they are not too Mozartian. So Mozartian would be very quick and crisp. It's not that kind of turn. So let's be sure that these are more expressive. Yeah. So then we've got one that comes up again. Oh, I guess it's a little bit away. So here's the next turn. So really be careful that it doesn't come off as too crisp and too perfect. Yeah? Whew. What a, we're going to wrap it up there. And I'm going to come back to questions for people. But Raj, what a performance. And thanks so much for the opportunity to teach a bit of this piece. This has been a huge amount of fun. Let's see. So Raj, you asked, do you have tips for the double notes and the rhythm and the development? I'm not exactly sure. I don't have any bar numbers in this. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by double notes, because there are two-note chords all over the place in most bars. Thank you, Anton. Thank you, Raj. Thanks for submitting, Raj. And I think everybody, especially if you heard Raj's performance, give him another round of applause. This is quite the piece. Raj, if you do have some bars in particular that we can look at, let me know about practicing double notes, the part right before the recap. So, Raj, are you meaning the... are you meaning, let's see, these? I'm totally sight reading this now. Those, or when we get to the octaves. Okay, so you said yes to the first one. Make sure that you've got a great fingering choice. Take advantage of all of the slurs that Rachmaninoff writes. Hey, Fred Viner's here. Awesome. So take advantage of these slurs to let the hand reset. You see how the wrist is moving there. That doesn't mean that we have to release, right? This passage doesn't call for that. But we can definitely keep the hand moving. Yeah, that would be my biggest tip for those. And really feel, we talked about this, I think, last time when you asked about the concerto, which, by the way, did you have that performance? Let us know, because you were playing Rock 2. Feel this down-up motion, exactly like we talked about in the passage in the concerto from 2 weeks ago. So down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And continue that as long as these two-note slurs exist. And you can even go further. Even when the rhythm speeds up, we can continue feeling that. That'll really let this be extremely punchy and crisp and precise. If we try to do it with all fingers, if the arm is locked up, it's going to be very, very hard to get that to be a forte dynamic. Awesome. Well, Raj says, Raj, your performance is next week. Well, good luck. For everybody, Raj is playing Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto with orchestra. So have a great time playing it, Raj. I hope you have a great performance. Awesome. Let's jump back and Antonio had said, I didn't know you're a Mason Hamlin artist. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for, you must have looked at my website or something. My piano is not a Mason and Hamlin yet. Maybe someday, that would be very cool. But no, I'm playing on a Kawai RX5, so it's a 6'6" grand. And if you've been tuned into the channel before, I just had a ton of work done on it. So I do have Renner hammers on it now, and I do have Mason and Hamlin, the carbon fiber action parts. I have some new action parts in there too. So that's, I guess, part Mason and Hamlin. Let's go back up to, oh yeah, before my internet cut out. Rodrigo had asked, what practice technique would you recommend for that kind of voicing control in chords? And I think this was when we were talking about, I think it's when we were talking about the big chords in the big octave passage. So, Rodrigo, is this what you are asking, since you just chimed in about that? Or just chord voicing in general, like voicing specific notes of chords, upper note, for example, versus lower note, etc. Let me know if that's what you mean, and we can use a little bit of that passage to explain. Yes. Okay, so the way that I always give to students to practice chord voicing is actually I first found out about it in the Dakhnyani exercise book, essential finger exercises. And the way Dakhnyani has us learn how to voice chords is by, let's just take a B flat minor chord. This is a hard example if you're a beginner, but we're going to go with it since we've been playing in B flat minor. Is that we will articulate one note of the chord as a grace note, and then the rest of the chord after that, piano. So our grace note gets an accent. If I start with the top this time, the faster we group the grace note with the chord, the grace note starts to go away. Yeah. Same thing. If I take, let's say, second finger, and then we work on combining that together and getting rid of the little rhythm. Second finger is still being brought out. Third finger, fifth finger, thumb. And what you end up learning is that as you play these different grace notes, you end up putting your wrist and your hand in a specific rotation to play that pitch. It's a lot easier to experience the rotation than for me to tell you, rotate toward, if you want to voice the top note up, rotate toward 5. Well, that's very hard to understand without feeling it, especially if it's spread over a chord like that. Because if you say rotate toward 5, well then I'm just not playing any of the other notes. Seth asks, so you use forearm rotation. It's like a miniature version of that. It's like a few degrees of forearm rotation, not the big type of movements we use to play other passages, like the one we were talking about here. You can see just how that's a ton of forearm rotation to play that. And to voice up 5 is just the slightest. It's a few degrees of turning the forearm toward 5, but that's all. And it's a lot easier to experience that if we play grace first and feel, if we're really anchored on that pitch, how we've moved the arm and the wrist and the hand to make that happen. So yeah, it's a combination of, forearm rotation. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Ahmed said, yeah, this little thing that looks like a bit of the lark. You're right. I have never played the lark, but I feel like everybody that I competed against when I was a teenager played the lark. I heard it played by so many people. Anton, you said, are Mason and Hamlin still in production? Yes, they are. There's a long history about Mason and Hamlin. I will, let me see if we have time to talk about some of that, but I want to make sure we get, if there are a couple other piano questions. Yeah, Fred, there's coffee in that mug, definitely. Okay, I'm going back through. Let me jump back up to, we have a couple questions here. One from Sir Wolseley and one from OCD King. Let me answer those, and then if we still have time, I will jump back in and talk a little bit about Mason and Hamlin history, because I think it's pretty cool, and they are one of, I think, only 3 piano makers currently manufacturing in the United States. Okay, Sir Wolseley, you asked for memorization tips with parts with lots of arpeggios. Yeah. So, Sir Wolseley, the most important thing is to know exactly what harmony the arpeggio makes. Practice them in blocked chords. That would absolutely be the way to go. So, I mean, there's even a passage, we skipped over it in the Rachmaninoff Sonata, but there's this passage, we skipped over it. All of that stuff. So if I were to really work on memorizing this, I would probably block all of the rest of those notes, and we can do the same thing. If it's just purely arpeggio, an arpeggio pattern, let's say with A flat, we can just block A flat with the, hopefully with some of the fingers we can use, or we can, if it's traversing a longer distance than that, can we block the arpeggio instead of it being all separated like that? Use the same fingers you're using, but play each group, each hand position as a blocked chord. And if you can even call out verbally while you're playing through, what harmony is it that you're playing? Or at least, like, what is the root of the chord? What is the bottom note? Depends on how you think about your theory. It doesn't have to be, the tools that we use to help analyze our music, they don't have to be theoretically correct, as long as they help us remember exactly where our hands need to go. So if you think about the bottom note being a cue for something, that can also be really helpful. So I do a combination of those two things to help memorize arpeggios, especially as you said fingering stays the same. Yeah, definitely. Get used to moving around the keyboard with that same fingering and doing it very, very quickly, knowing exactly where your landmark is, if that's the root or if it's just the lowest note. Let me jump back over to, so OCD King had asked earlier, you said, when playing a C major chord, I can keep fingers 1 and 5 relaxed, but always feel tension in 3. How can I add in the third finger without introducing tension at the same time? I'm going to give you, this is actually elsewhere on the channel, but let's talk through a quick warm-up exercise. I gave this to a couple students of mine recently also. So 1 and 5 is okay, you said. We're going to continue to focus on that and play 1 and 5 and then launch off with the middle fingers. We can do this over and over again. Notice how the wrist is very flexible and my inner fingers are also not tight as I play 1 and 5. So I know you said this is okay for you right now. I'm playing 1 and 5 alone. We want to get used to feeling this amount of relaxation and then using the inner fingers and having them also be relaxed as soon as possible. Okay. Let me give you one other thing to think about. If that is working okay, and we go back to playing the chord and we still have tension, think about playing very, very, very softly. And the reason the tension is happening is probably because we're afraid of playing with second finger and fourth finger. And if we're afraid of playing with them and we try to lift them up, and then 3, the tendons, these are all, in a sense, they work together or against each other. So if we're trying to lift 2 and 4 but play 3, that's very, very difficult. So if we play very softly and let 3 come down into the key, but not worry about pulling 2 and 4 out of the way. And if 2 and 4 happen to sound a little bit, that's okay. We want to get rid of the feeling of getting them out of the way of the rest of our playing, right? And notice how, as I'm doing this, I'm also basically playing with arm weight. I'm just dropping in. I'm trying to use less finger so that I'm not lifting or doing anything like that. I'm just on the key surface, dropping in. And if 2 plays a little bit, that's fine. We'll little by little work on making sure that 2 doesn't play. But first, we want to get rid of the tension. First, feel what this is like to let the hand just drop. And then we can work at the tiniest bit of structure that we introduce to keep 2 and 4 from playing with the whole hand. But I would work on those 2 things first. Relaxing and spring, and then just playing 1, 3, 5 with arm weight only. Dith, that was a great comment. Dith said, feels like I walked into a college class. Hey, you know what? If you can make the Merry Farmer breathless, then breathless and erupting like a volcano, that would be quite the recital piece. Great. Okay, I think I hit some of those questions from earlier. Oh, and so Seth asked, where do you feel your weight right now, sitting at rest? So this isn't a fantastic example because my bench is really far forward for the camera angle to work really well. But if I were to sit in a better position to actually play, the sitting weight is on the sit bones. If you know what the sit bones are, you can pull up a diagram. You can just Google it and it'll show you where the sit bones are. And we want to feel like our weight is centered there. As we move around, weight shifts. So, gosh, I'll continue to use the Rachmaninoff piece as an example. As we play, for example, the opening line, I'm not going to sit in this one position and play. So let me show you instead. If I move the way I would, by the time I play the lower octave, I'm actually off the sit bone on my right side, and I have some weight supported by my left leg. And then as soon as we come back to the other chords, I need to shift position. There's always a lot of that going on in advanced repertoire. We're always shifting weight back and forth and moving the torso. But in a static position, or let's say if we have a piece that's not moving as much, feeling like we're centered on the sit bones, and we can always do just a little bit of leaning in both directions. That's going to get us through a huge amount of repertoire, a huge amount, before we really have to start incorporating more body motion than that and feeling like we're playing more from the back and from the legs. So I hope that, let's see, Seth, I hope that answers a bit of your question. See, Ahmed, you should submit a video of yourself playing the Beethoven number 3. Off the top of my head, unfortunately, I do not have any, without really being able to hear you play it, I don't have any ideas that would stick out about playing that concerto in particular. But I would feel free to send over a video of yourself playing it. It's just, if it's 2 pianos, if you have an excerpt that you would like some feedback on, that's not the whole thing, send it over, and we can talk about it. It'll be a lot easier to give you some concrete advice. Ahmed, you can always send it over. I know we had a very advanced video today, but you can always send over exactly where it is in progress. It doesn't have to be finished, performance ready. It doesn't have to be that. Yeah, that would be my primary suggestion. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful today. And 2 months, you said it took 2 months to get the first section? That's just fine. That is just fine. I don't know if Raj is still here, but it would be interesting to hear how long he has worked on the Rachmaninoff Sonata. If I were to learn it today, I would want, oh gosh, months on it. I usually say for a piece of music, especially like this, somewhere between 200 and 500 hours of practice before I would perform it publicly. And the little bits I played for you today were after about 6 hours. So far from the amount of time I'd love to spend on it. You said you played the cadenza. Just send the cadenza over, Ahmed. That would be great to see. Why don't we wrap up today with a little bit of a talk about Mason and Hamlin pianos, since that was brought up earlier. And yeah, Antonio said I'm on their website. Yes. They don't have many artists, but I am one of the people that they've endorsed, and we talk regularly. I'm in the middle of a big project for them right now. So Antonio said Mason Hamlin made the best baby grand, and you think they're up there with Bechstein. They're great pianos, really, really great pianos. Mason Hamlin has a mixed history, so they are one of the only American piano manufacturers. They started way back mid-19th century, kind of alongside Steinway. And Mason and Hamlin did not really survive the Depression in the United States, the Great Depression. So the name survived, but the company has been sold a number of times, and the Mason and Hamlin name was not an American piano manufacturer for the majority of the 20th century. So if you play a Mason and Hamlin piano that's from the turn of the century, or if you've played one, or if you play, let's say, up through about 1920 or so, I don't know the history perfectly, but about there, they're definitely American-made, and they were designed by Gertz is his last name. Gertz, before he went to work for Steinway. Interesting tidbit. So they have a common history. Steinway and Mason and Hamlin have a common history of that one head designer working for them around the golden era of pianos. He worked at each company. Mason and Hamlin was the name, and all of the blueprints for their instruments were purchased back. I can't remember the exact company name, but they were purchased back into the United States basically by the Burgett brothers in 1996. And they worked to reopen a factory in Boston, Massachusetts, in the Boston area. The factory is actually in Haverhill, which is about 45 minutes north of Boston. It's a really cool place. All of their pianos are, they're all handmade instruments. They have a very, very small, it's like 8 people that build all of their pianos. So they don't make a ton. I think they make under 500 pianos a year. And I feel like they're also leading the way today with redesigning the piano action. Not changing the way it works, but changing the components out to being carbon fiber. And Antonio says Mason Hamlin had the unique design of the rounded booster underneath the board. So that's called the, I think it's called the tension resonator system. Something like that. And it looks like a little spider web. There's this big round piece that's steel underneath, and it has these spokes that go out and attach to the rim. They're the only piano manufacturer that has that. And the whole purpose of the design is to hold the rim exactly in place, which keeps the crown and the soundboard over an extremely long period of time. So if you think about the piano as it sits here, uprights too, so the soundboard on a grand is going this way. It is under pressure. So a piece of wood, you can knock on a piece of wood and it doesn't really do anything if it's flat. But take a thin piece of wood, and if you arch it, if not cut it to an arch, but if you take that flat piece and compress the sides so that it bows, it resonates like crazy. You can easily see that. You know, if you look at the back of an acoustic guitar, that's the most accessible instrument for everybody. The back is curved. It's not flat. If you look at the front and back of any string instrument, violin, cello, all of those, they are all curved. They're under tension. They're under pressure. So that soundboard is being pushed together by the rim of the piano. And one of the biggest causes of the death of a piano is a soundboard that cracks. That could happen because of transportation, or really poor conditions. If the piano is kept in extreme weather or things like that, the soundboard's going to crack. It can't withstand those changes in temperature and humidity. But what also happens to a lot of instruments is that over time, there is so much pressure from the soundboard wanting to release. And think about an instrument that's 50 years old, and the soundboard has been putting hundreds of pounds of pressure on the rim for all of that time. The rim is in two pieces, and the rim starts to separate. And so you'll have a lot of pianos that, if you're in the market to buy a used piano, that's one of the big things to always check that's not visible at all. You can get underneath the piano and you can look, or you can just feel the side with your hand, and you can feel where the inner rim and the outer rim are, and you can feel if there's been any separation. And if there is separation, there'll be like a bump, or you'll feel one rim higher or lower than the other one. If that's happening, that means the soundboard is in movement and it's losing resonance, or it's lost a lot than it already has. So the whole reason that you have that spider web steel mechanism that is under Mason and Hammond pianos is to prevent that from happening over 100 years or more. That's why it's there. So yeah, there was a bit of history lesson about Mason and Hammond. So they're back in the United States. They and Steinway are the two, I would say, boutique piano manufacturers that are in the United States. And I want to say Charles Walter is the third company that currently manufactures in the United States. But I don't think they make any grand pianos larger than about 6 feet. So they're not in the concert piano game. They're not in like the pianos for professor studios or things like that, conservatory pianos. And so they don't get talked about very much. They're all smaller instruments, baby grands. Other than that, I don't know anything about that company. But I should throw out there that they do produce pianos in the U.S. And I'm pretty sure Baldwin does not. I don't even know if Baldwin still makes pianos, and if they do, it's the Baldwin name manufactured in a different country. It's not American anymore. Ahmed, I'll answer your question, then we'll call it a day today. Ahmed asked, does playing on an electric piano, is it not helpful to develop faster? Is it not helpful? Let me see if I can answer that. Do you mean like develop technique faster? Playing on a digital can be great in certain circumstances. It has to be a well-designed acoustic feel digital. That will always yield the best results. So you asked, is it bad to play on a digital? It can be very bad to play on a digital. If your digital does not have weighted keys at all, that's not good for your technique. Usually, non-weighted keys actually introduce tension in the playing mechanism because the keys go down so easily, there's no resistance, that we don't really learn how to relax the rest of the hand. You can watch close-ups of concert pianists playing in recital, music that they practiced a ton. You will see them sometimes, they hit keys right next to notes that they're playing. They don't sound because they're not depressed hard enough. But in the moment, we can see all kinds of stuff going on. And if you looked inside the piano, you might see a couple hammers just wiggling around a little bit. If they were to play that way on a non-weighted keyboard, they'd be actually playing all of those pitches. But that is not we don't have to worry about that on an acoustic because the keys have weight. So a good weighted digital is great. And in fact, if I have a performance coming up, I have a digital that I love playing on, and I have my acoustic, and I practice on both. Because this piano has a very certain feel, and I'm extremely used to it, and my digital is different. Sometimes, for all of us that are performers, a lot of people here, whether you're studying and you're fresh to piano, or you are a professional, right? We all, when we play a recital, we play a performance, we get a piano that's not our home piano. So I use a great digital as a secondary instrument to practice on. It's similar to when you study if you study at a conservatory or in university or in college, you have halls full of practice rooms, and those practice rooms all have different pianos in them, and they all have their own personality. And so if you're in a program like that, you have to get used to every day you have a different piano to practice on. And you'll spend 5 hours on one particular piano, and then the next day, that one, someone will be using it all day. You have to go somewhere else. So I can simulate that. We can all simulate that. If we do have two instruments at home, a decent digital that has weighted keys and an acoustic, whether it's an upright or a grand, that's phenomenal for helping to simulate that. And I do the same thing. Because sometimes when I get to a hall and I'm at my at the concert instrument, sometimes it feels more like this one, and sometimes it feels more like my digital. And it's really great to have experienced music on both. Antonio says digital is not as bad for your neighbors. That's absolutely true. Would I say Mason and Hamlin have a philosophy a bit like Fazioli? I think so. I think that they do. I have always wondered in Italy how much does a Fazioli cost, because in the United States they're extraordinarily expensive. And I've played a handful of them. You know, a really good piano is a really good piano, and in some ways the brand names the distinctions between them start to go away. A great Yamaha CFX and a great Steinway D and a great Mason and Hamlin CC and a great Bosendorfer, was it like a 294, and a Fazioli. The new Fazioli is 300 and some odd centimeters long. They all have characteristics that are very similar, and the nuance is really what becomes the deciding factor between them. But in the sense, yeah, Mason and Hamlin being all handmade instruments, they serve a boutique market without being really boutique prices. Their pianos they cost a fraction of what a new Steinway would cost. And I think, honestly, I think they're easily as good. Dith said, you played and bombed on a Fazioli that cost more than your house. Yeah. Yeah, isn't that funny? Let's see. Juan okay. I've got to wrap up real soon, but let me try to answer Juan's question. Could you explain what it means to play rubato? You understand legato, staccato, but how do you make rubato? Rubato is give and take of time. So a good rubato will retain a sense of pulse. So this is why usually when we study music, we play things that have more of a strict sense of pulse as we start out learning, and we play less often. We play things that need rubato or need more push and pull of phrase, because we really want to have built in our internal timekeeper. So that's why beginner students a lot of time play a lot of Bach, they play a lot of Mozart, some Beethoven, the bagatelles, things like that. We're going to be keeping really, really great time through all of those. Rubato, Antonio says rubato means stolen in Italian. It's yeah, taking time, stealing time. But good rubato steals time and gives it back. It's, I guess you could think of it kind of like, as like Peter Pan. So if we have a great sense, a great internal sense of phrase and of tempo, let me find something that's a little bit, not so many notes as the Rachmaninoff we were talking about. Oh, here, this just came up. This is something a student of mine worked on for a bit. This is a piece by William Gillick, Arabesque Sentimentale. Yeah. So let me count out loud tempo. If I play this very strictly, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's one phrase. If I take rubato and I give and take time, the tempo turns into this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you hear how the pulse is still very consistent over time. We can still feel that it's there. It's not like we change tempo. It's not an abrupt change. But we're taking time away in some places and then giving it back in other places. I was just reading a little bit about this is a fun, interesting description of Chopin's rubato, his sense of rubato. Liszt said Chopin's rubato was like a tree with the leaves blowing in the wind, where one aspect, whether it was the accompaniment or the underlying pulse, was very firm and stable, and everything else around it was free to move. I think that's a really cool analogy. So not every composer are we going to play music like that with that kind of analogy. They wouldn't all want that. But that's a great place to start with our interpretation of what rubato is. We have this underlying structure, the pulse, and then how we move and how we play with that is, that's what gives us this sense of freedom throughout the phrase. Yeah, Juan, it's a little bit like ritardando. It's a little bit. But ritardando is almost, the difference is that rit is almost always at the end of a statement or at the end of a phrase or at the end of an idea. Even if it's not written in the piece to rit, we usually add something like that in a lot of times. Even in a good ritardando, we want to keep the sense of pulse. We don't want to just kind of fall off, a cliff. It's not a fermata. A fermata is simply a hold without pulse. That's really the biggest difference between rit and fermata. And rubato, unless there are some other markings, we probably won't go as far as what a rit says, or what an accelerando says, or what a stringendo says, or stretto. Any of those words, those are tempo fluctuations. They don't take us out of the tempo, the main tempo we're in, but they push us in or pull us in different ways more than what a rubato would. So a composer would write an extra direction for us so that we know, do something extra that's not just your standard push and pull of time. Oh, all right. What a live stream today. Thanks so much to everybody that attended and came out, and a huge thanks to Raj for sending in the Rachmaninoff Sonata. I think he's gone, so I'll have to email him and find out how long he's been playing the piece and share it with all of you. But thanks so much. We're going to do this again in, I think, about 2 weeks. Let's see. Yeah, we will. On the 12th of July. So tune back in on the 12th of July for another live stream. Again, if there's anybody that ever wants to submit a video for a masterclass, always feel free. There's those directions in the description below. And awesome. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks Sir Wolseley and Juan and Jess and Fred. It's always good to see you. Antonio, thanks for being here. Awesome. All right, well, have a great day, everybody. Have a great week. Hope your summer's going well, and I'll see you next time. All right.